The French Dispatch is the most Wes Anderson that Wes Anderson has ever Wes Andersoned. It's quirky, it's twee, and the production design is so meticulous that you can feel the OCD practically oozing off of the screen. The first live-action film Anderson has directed since 2014's The Grand Budapest Hotel, The French Dispatch is an anthology-style film with 3 main stories and a wraparound segment. It's set in the fictional town of Ennui, France. It's both a love letter to journalism and the films of the French New Wave, with an expansive cast of all-star actors, including Owen Wilson, Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody, Tilda Swinton, Lea Seydoux, Frances McDormand, Timothée Chalamet, Christoph Waltz, Jeffrey Wright, Liv Schreiber, Willem Dafoe, Henry Winkler, Edward Norton, Elizabeth Moss, Saoirse Ronan, Jason Schwartzman, and Bill Murray. Not to mention even smaller roles for people like Griffin Dunne of American Werewolf in London and Wallace Wolodarski, who wrote for The Simpsons for its first 4 seasons. The music is composed by Alexander Desplat and Randall Poster, who have worked frequently with Anderson. There are some playful and elegant piano melodies here that I really enjoyed. Some of it calls back to the minimal yet beautiful work of composer Erik Satie. Robert Yeoman handles the cinematography. He's been working with Anderson all the way back to his first film, Bottle Rocket. Like other films he has shot for Wes Anderson, it's filled with stationary symmetrical shots, and everything has a storybook element to it. Everything within the frame is deeply considered, every object, every actor, every movement. There is such care to detail when it comes to the elaborate sets and the extensive narration, but The French Dispatch didn't resonate with me on an emotional level, and that's my biggest issue with it. It loses some of the heart that earlier Wes Anderson films had, even though from a production standpoint, they might have been a little more rough around the edges. I found because of the anthology format, there wasn't enough time to become emotionally invested in these characters, and I thought the film peaked with the first story. By the final story, I had pretty much checked out. I consider myself a fan of Wes Anderson's filmmaking. He's a unique voice in an industry filled with homogeny, but to be completely honest, this is one of my least favorite films I've seen by him. That is not to say that this is a bad movie by any means. Visually, the film looks great, and there are plenty of really good actors involved. If you weren't that big on Wes Anderson films before, this one is not going to change your mind in the slightest. Even the character names sound so Wes Anderson. J.K.L. Berenson, Lucinda Crimmins, Herb St. Sazerac. It's the most literate movie from 2021. There is consistent narration from various characters throughout, most of which is verbose and witty. This line from Timothée Chalamet stood out though.
Will she still remember the taste of my tool on the tip of her tongue?
I guess that's why they call him Tim the Toolman Chalamet. Oh, do they not actually call him that? Each story is a magazine article in which the writer documents a personal experience. The first section of the film is a very brief opening where Owen Wilson's Herb St. Sazerac character rides on a bike and gives us an introduction to the town of Ennui. This really exists as a framing device in order to do a little world building. In the first full story, Benicio del Toro is an artist who is in prison for murder, and the art world is trying to commission a new painting from him while he starts a romantic relationship with one of the prison guards. The ending to this one is zany and slapstick, and it also has some good commentary on the nature of art. It's framed around Tilda Swinton, who plays the writer J.K.L. Berenson, giving a lecture at an art gallery, so this is a story within a story within a story. There's a mixture of color and black and white scenes throughout the film, and here it differentiates between the lecture scenes and the scenes within the prison. In the second story, Frances McDormand is the writer Lucinda Crimmins, and she entertains a romantic relationship with a young and pretentious leftist revolutionary played by Timothée Chalamet, while he tries to write his manifesto. Frances McDormand and Timothée Chalamet make a really awkward couple, I just want to say. I don't really buy that couple at all. The final story is framed around an interview with Jeffrey Wright's character, Roebuck Wright. This segment mixes live action and animation to tell a cops and robbers story in which the police chief's son is kidnapped, and it's all centered around food. After each story, we return to the office of the French Dispatch to see the editor-in-chief, played by Bill Murray, going over potential changes that could be made to the magazine articles that the audience has just witnessed, giving a little insight into the creative process and the nature of storytelling. The film ends with another brief section like the opening, an obituary for the Bill Murray character, which is not a spoiler because the film opens with an article about his passing. I would like to go into each section a little deeper, which means potential spoilers, so if you're a Wes Anderson fan, I'd give this film a recommendation. But if not, I'd recommend starting with one of his earlier films. The Cycling Reporter by Herb St. Sazerac is not a full story. I don't have much to say about it. I am curious about this one part where past and future images of areas around town are juxtaposed. In each image, the past image is in black and white, except for the image of the Butcher's Arcade, where the future image is in black and white, and the past image is in color. I doubt this is a mistake, but I'm not sure what it's supposed to mean. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all. The Concrete Masterpiece by J.K.L. Berenson was my favorite of the three stories. However, I don't like the parts where it cuts to Tilda Swinton's writer character giving a speech at a podium. The humor here just didn't work for me. Her character was very annoying. I suppose this was the point. The story itself is fun though. Benicio del Toro is an artist locked up in a prison, and he's commissioned to do a new work. He paints his new masterpiece on the walls of the prison so that it can never be sold unless they dismantle the prison. The unlikely relationship that Benicio del Toro's character has with the guard softens the audience's perception of his character, who murdered someone unprovoked in his youth. The exploration of the art world and the concept of art itself is fun. Like the other two magazine articles that make up the bulk of the film, it's a very dark story but told in a light-hearted way. Revisions to a Manifesto by Lucinda Criments is the story of a young hipster revolutionary named Zeffirelli, whom the writer of the story has a sexual relationship with, before Zeffirelli dies trying to fix a pirate radio tower so he can read his manifesto to the masses. They end up putting his face on t-shirts like he's Che Guevara or something. It's kind of an affectionate parody of leftist ideology. The author of the story sleeps with Zeffirelli as she helps him revise his manifesto, which causes problems with his girlfriend, who is also a political activist. It's a coming-of-age comedic short with an age-inappropriate relationship. It's like Anderson's breakthrough Rushmore by way of Jean-Luc Godard, who has embraced Marxism during his filmmaking career. This story doesn't really promote or criticize any ideology, though. It's just a light-hearted story about rebellious youth in love. The Private Dining Room of the Police Commissioner by Roebuck Wright, who remembers every word he has ever written, is a story told within an interview. Like the other stories, a significant amount of the story is about the writer himself and his involvement in the story. He relates how the Bill Murray character hired him while he was incarcerated. His article is about a child getting kidnapped and a chef poisoning the kidnappers with a meal. One criminal escapes, and there's a cartoon car chase scene that I suppose is the film's third act finale. Jeffrey Wright provides great narration, but this is all a little too long-winded for such a simple story. These writers were all loosely based on real people. For example, the character of Roebuck Wright is supposed to be a combination of James Baldwin and Tennessee Williams. James Baldwin actually lived in France between 1948 and 1957, and he also died there in 1987. Even though the character of Roebuck Wright is based on James Baldwin, his story doesn't really have the themes about race and class that Baldwin's work is known for. It's ultimately just silly cops and robbers fluff. Again, the technique is outstanding. For example, the camera panning across room after room of the criminal's hideout after the poisoning scene. It's all really well constructed, but the characters and story are simply not that engaging to me. In the end, the writers collectively write the obituary for the Bill Murray character, who selfishly wanted the whole company to be dismantled upon his death. His corpse is comically laid out on his desk under a white sheet. I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on this one. Not bad, not great, didn't love it, didn't hate it. It's better than your average movie, but personally it didn't do that much for me. I still think Wes Anderson is an incredibly talented filmmaker. I still love most of his work, but I'd put this film and Moonrise Kingdom lower on my list. Critics loved Moonrise Kingdom, but it was really cutesy and the main characters were children. I just wasn't that into it. The name of the town, Ennui, is essentially the French word for a kind of boredom, an existential malaise. I note this because I found the French Dispatch kind of boring. It could be because the anthology format reduces the amount of time we get with the characters, or the fact that the characters don't always feel like real people. Sometimes they're more like cogs in a machine set to a metronome. Maybe it's because at this point, I can pretty much imagine what a Wes Anderson movie is like before I've even seen it. I do really respect that he made this movie for $25 million. The Grand Budapest Hotel also cost $25 million to make, and that one really popped off at the box office. It made $172.9 million. The French Dispatch, however, only made $44 million back. It came out in October of 2021, and I'm always busy watching horror movies in October, so that's why I'm just getting to it now. Even though I didn't love this movie, I don't regret watching it because it's an original idea and there was a lot of care put into it. It gives me no pleasure to rate this 6 out of 10. I wish I liked it more, but this is still a light recommendation. It's kind of like a series of children's stories, but made for adults.